everyone, and welcome to our video on the light-independent reaction, the second part of the process of photosynthesis. Now, the light-independent reaction also goes by the name of the dark reaction or the Calvin-Benson cycle. So keep that in mind as we talk about it, as those will be interchanged throughout. So we're going to start by talking about how this works. There's three parts to the dark reaction or the Calvin-Benson cycle. The first one being carbon fixation. So in your notes, you're going to write down the 3 steps before we draw them. So carbon fixation is all about utilizing carbon dioxide. So in video 1 about the light-dependent reaction, I said that there are reactants that go into photosynthesis: carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. In the very first video, we learned that water and sunlight started off the whole process. But I said that there's still carbon dioxide. Where does carbon dioxide come into play? And this is where it is. So in the second half of the reaction, carbon dioxide comes in and bonds to a compound called ribulose biphosphate, or RUBP. RUBP is a 5-carbon compound that we are going to see cycle through, and that's why the name Calvin-Benson cycle comes through, is because we're going to see it cycle through and come back to the beginning. So the reactant of carbon dioxide is used in the second half of photosynthesis. We know that water and sunlight in the first half gave us NADPH and ATP. So we're going to use those in this process. So the second part to the dark reaction is called the reduction phase. So now what has to happen is this RUBP molecule is now a 6-carbon compound, okay? This 6-carbon compound, because it stole the carbon from the carbon dioxide, is very, very, very unstable. So it breaks down into 2 3-carbon compounds called PGA. Now this process is energized by the ATP that we have from the first reaction, and then it's reduced by the NADPH that we made in the first reaction. In the end, when we're done all of that, we have to replace RUBP because it is a cycle, the Calvin-Benson cycle. So this is called the regeneration phase. We now have a molecule called PGAL, because remember, we reduced it, we added to it, we built it. Okay, so we took energy from NADPH, so we took the electron away from NADPH, put it onto PGA, and made PGAL. So we reduced that molecule. So now we have to take one of those and recombine it back into RUBP. So we use more of the ATP from the very first process that we saw, and we use it to break the bonds in PGAL and remake RUBP. So these are the 3 steps. Now, in words, probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but we're going to look at it as a cycle and draw the different steps that are occurring. So you can pause it here to just continue to finish writing down the steps, or you can come back and redo the steps after. So let's start by drawing the very first step, carbon fixation. So here's CO2, and it is being added to RUBP. So there's my 5-carbon compound, my 1-carbon compound over here, CO2. So we take them and we add them together to make this very unstable 6-carbon compound. Because it is very unstable, it breaks down into 2 compounds. Both of them are PGA. Now, PGA is going to be utilized in the next step. So this is the first step. Here comes the second step, the reduction step. So the reduction step now takes these 2 PGA molecules and steals energy from ATP. So ATP goes back to its original form of ADP, and then it steals energy from NADPH to make PGAL. So this is what we would call the reduction phase. The reason we call it the reduction phase is because we're stealing energy from the bond between phosphorus and hydrogen here. We're stealing the energy in the electron, adding it over here. So we reduced PGA, because reduced means gain of electrons. We gained an electron and added on to this. Now this PGAL will go off and form a bond with another PGAL, which will eventually make glucose. Now, this part here happens when we do this cycle twice. So I'll explain that in a second. Only one of the PGALs that is made from this process will go on to be glucose. Okay. I need two of them to do this. So what happens is the whole cycle, step 1, 2, and then over here will be 3, has to happen twice to make one compound of glucose. Glucose is a product of photosynthesis, the reaction. Carbon dioxide plus water plus sunlight makes or gives us oxygen and glucose. We know oxygen was released in the first reaction. We now have found where glucose is made. So now we have everything that is in the reaction in words now figured out where it was in the processes between these two spaces. But I called this the Calvin-Benson cycle. So we know it has to continue. So what ends up happening is in phase 3, regeneration or replacing RUBP, this PGAL, which did not get to go off and make glucose, has to be recombined and stripped down to make RUBP. What ends up happening is we steal off a carbon, we energize the process using ATP, and we remake RUBP. Okay, so I said it takes this 2 times around to make glucose. Okay, so what's happening is we go through this process twice, and then you'll get one glucose molecule. Now, the reason why when you look at the photosynthesis reaction, NADPH and ATP are not part of the reactions is because they go back and forth between the two parts of photosynthesis. Reminding yourself that the light-dependent reaction and the light-independent reaction happen all at once. We talk about it in 2 separate phases, but it is photosynthesis. It's one process. So what you need to make sure you have in your notes is the 3 steps. This entire picture in full so that you can see how the process works. We're going to draw another picture that may help kind of simplify this a little bit to help you understand it a little bit more. But if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know.